Welcome to the John Cady Podcast. I'm John Cady, U.S. Navy retired, former minister. This episode touches on a topic that is very close to my heart because of where it took place. From 1992 to 1994, I was stationed aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt, which is a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier. Used to be homeported in Norfolk, Virginia, then it switched to the West Coast. In March of 2020, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the COVID-19 virus found its way aboard the ship and sailors got sick. The commanding officer, Brett Crozier, a full-bird captain in the United States Navy, attempted to address the situation to protect his crew, and as a result, he ended up being relieved of command. What happened? Why was Captain Crozier relieved of command when he was trying to save his crew and trying to save lives to reduce the spread of a disease that at that time not much was really known about? Who was Captain Brett Crozier? Brett Elliott Crozier was born in Santa Rosa, California on February 24th, 1970. He graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1992, and after numerous tours of duty, when he became eligible for command, he had 3 tours of command, VFA 94, the USS Blue Ridge, and in November of 2019, he became the commanding officer of the USS Theodore Roosevelt. The timeline leading up to the USS Theodore Roosevelt and the COVID-19 outbreak. In 2020, the TR was on deployment in the Pacific. In February of 2020, she was in Guam. During that time, a cruise ship that was attempting to pull into Guam was denied entry because a COVID-19 outbreak took place on the ship, and Guam, being the small island territory that it is, lacked the facilities to properly handle a major outbreak of COVID cases. However, a month later, in March 15th of 2020, the first case of COVID was recorded in Guam. And those cases were already straining the island's ability to handle additional cases. Meanwhile, in March of 2020, the USS Theodore Roosevelt made a 4-day port visit to Da Nang, Vietnam. The port visit was cut short because it turned out that some of the guests at the hotel had tested positive for COVID. An emergency recall was done, brought everybody back on board. So far, so good. It looked like the captain was acting responsibly, as he should, because he was looking out for the safety and best interests of the crew. Yeah, it might have been frustrating. It's like, why did our port visit get cut short? Well, we had something crazy going on, and stuff was getting serious. However, when the ship left, there were no test kits on board yet. In fact, there weren't any tests done until the 19th of March by the Navy's mobile laboratory. 22 March, this is where it starts to get real, folks. On 22 March 2020, the first positive case of COVID was reported aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt. 2 days later, 3 further sailors of the flight crew tested positive, and all 4 of them were flown out to Guam. The next day, 5 more sailors. So this stuff was spreading quick. Now, why would it spread so quick? Let's stop right there for a second. Why would it stop so quick? Because on a ship, it's a very close quarter environment. You are rubbing shoulders with each other, almost literally. You know, if one person gets sick, it's going to spread, and it's going to spread fast. And it wasn't too long after that, dozens of people, as I'm reading here, tested positive. So it's escalating. The situation's getting worse, and it's getting worse fast. And it wasn't long after that, an emergency order was sent out. The Theodore Roosevelt was ordered to return to Guam. Between 26 and 27 March, the ship was pierside, and most of the crew were restricted to the ship. Okay, again, not the best of situations, but there you go. We're trying to keep everybody quarantined, keep everybody safe. By the end of the month, the 30th of March, Captain Crozier, now this is where the controversy comes in. And this is what ended up with him being relieved of command. He sent it says here, an unclassified email to 3 admirals in his chain of command, including the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet and Admiral Stuart Baker, who was the commander of Carrier Strike Group 9, and his immediate senior. The memo outlined the coronavirus outbreak aboard the ship and recommended that he be given permission to evacuate all non-essential sailors, quarantine known COVID cases, and then sanitize, deep clean the ship. So aside from the email, Captain Crozier was trying to do the right thing. He was doing what he could because he wanted to save his crew. He wanted to put a stop to the spread of a disease that was decimating everybody. People were getting sick. At the end of the month, March 31st, over 100 sailors tested positive, and because this was an unclassified email and it also went to several captains aboard the ship, in addition to the admirals, somewhere in the midst of all this, and the source material I'm reading here does not specify who did it, the letter was leaked to the San Francisco Chronicle. On the 1st of April, the Navy then ordered the aircraft carrier largely evacuated with a skeleton crew to stick around to maintain the nuclear reactor, firefighting equipment, the galley, and a disinfecting and sanitizing crew. About 1,000 sailors were moved off to Naval Base Guam, and 1,700 hotel rooms were also booked on the island for the sailors. Secretary Thomas Motley, who was acting U.S. Navy Secretary at the time, announced that Captain Crozier was being relieved of command. According to the Secretary, he claimed that the captain had sent the letter to 20 or 30 people and had gone outside his chain of command. However, that can be disputed because the letter also was directly to his superior, Admiral Baker. Now, I'm not going to go any further on this as far as how many more crew members tested positive, but it did say here that as of 20 April 2020, over 4,000 sailors were moved off the ship out of the crew total of 4,800. And out of the test results, 678 total tested positive, 3,900 so tested negative. Captain Crozier eventually tested positive for COVID himself. But what happened after that? When Captain Crozier received the word that he was being relieved of command, he was given a standing ovation of respect by his crew because the crew knew that Captain Crozier acted in their best interests. He wasn't worried about putting a star on his collar. He was trying to save lives. He was trying to protect his crew. And if it meant sacrificing furthering his career, that was the risk Captain Crozier was willing to take. When Secretary Motley arrived to address the crew after Captain Crozier was relieved, he was not greeted so warmly. Attempts to have Captain Crozier reinstated in command unfortunately did not work. It was recommended, and then the Navy turned around and rescinded that recommendation, which meant that Captain Crozier ended up going to a shore command where he rode out the rest of his career until he retired in 2022. Looking back on the whole situation, was Captain Crozier a hero? That's up to everyone to decide on their own, but in my opinion, Captain Crozier was a hero. He may have made what was considered a mistake by sending a letter through unclassified channels, but I believe that he did the right thing and he did address the problem to the right people, and he was willing to take that risk because he valued his crew more than he valued his career. That makes him a man of integrity. That makes him a hero. Someone who, if I had been stationed aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt during his tenure aboard, I would have been proud to call him my captain. This is John Cady. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy these podcasts, hit like, hit subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one.